Juggalos in recovery.
Juggalos in recovery, man.
All right. Well, it's top of the hour, so it's time for me to start talking shit. So I'm Chris. I got involved in Juggalos in recovery kind of by accident, but we're going to start with my origin story. So I was a product of the crack baby epidemic of the late 80s, early 90s. So ended up bad household, ended up being orphaned, spent first 5 years of my life in orphanages. Really have a whole lot going on there except for the one friend that I made. The one friend I made there happened to be a juggalo that got transferred in from outside of Maryland, most likely, because they happened to have a couple of ICP cassettes. So that's where I found ICP. That's how I got involved in juggalo shit. So I had this really dope Ringmaster cassette when I got to leave the orphanage. Eventually, I got adopted, pretty nice people, bounced around to a couple of different foster homes in between, going from the orphanage to a real home. Parents were really nice. 5 years old, 4th of July, I got adopted sometime in the early summer. I think it was April, May. 4th of July was the first time I got to have a drink. So we had champagne, cigars, and I got to
About what year was that?
which year for what? For Ringmaster?
When you first got introduced, was that actually Ringmaster time or a little later?
It was a good bit later. So I wasn't adopted until 94, 95. But even still, to try to find that kind of stuff outside of, the Midwest was a little bizarre. Because, like, anything prior to Malenko, you really couldn't find shit in stores because it really didn't
Yeah.
have that distribution power. Like, sure, Jive was behind Riddlebox, but it's still a very regional thing.
Yeah, well, they weren't pushing it.
No, but went from adoption to living with my parents, age 5. They had a big 4th of July party. Everybody had champagne and cigars. Now, I got a champagne and cigar. I downed like 3 to 6 glasses that night. Don't remember if I was drunk or I was just a child and passed out. But continuously throughout my childhood, my parents would just throw these massive, massive parties. And there would always be drinks everywhere. You could never tell what was Kool-Aid and what was some kind of party liquid. So I was constantly getting into things that I definitely should not have had at the age that I did. Get into school life era. I go to school for about 3 years before my parents decide that I don't really fit in. I don't have the social skills and I don't know how to behave. So I ended up being homeschooled. So here I am as a child, bounce from home to home, do the therapy thing, blah, blah, blah. Not that super interesting, but end up being homeschooled. At that time, I'm living on an island in the middle of Maryland in this neighborhood that is mostly full of older people, no children in the neighborhood close to my age, except for one person. Go through all of elementary and middle school homeschooled. Don't have anything to do most of the days. So when my parents aren't looking, go into the liquor cabinet, sneak a few drinks, feel a little happier. Get into high school. My parents decide that I need to develop social skills, so go into public high school with my zero social skills. End up running into the one person who lives in my neighborhood. He becomes my drinking buddy. So Every night we go over to his house. We drink about a pint each of just straight vodka every single night. And then it gets Friday nights, it's gallon nights. I'm going to drink a gallon a night. And then it goes to, well, school's really fucking boring. We're going to start drinking in school, mix a little Kool-Aid in it, a little fruit juice, make it so it doesn't look anything suspicious. And that goes fine for about 6 to 7 months. My friend Mike ends up introducing me to his friend, who happens to be a weed dealer. So we buy some weeds. He said, fuck it. There's this big festival coming up. It's a local radio rock festival thing going on. I didn't care about any of the music that was going on. So we go to this festival. We smoke some weed. Woohoo. Weed's not anything exciting for me. I don't really get anything out of it, but it's different than what I'm used to. So gives me something a little bit more fun to do. So we continue to smoke, we continue to drink. And then when that becomes not enough, we ask his dealer if he's got anything else besides just weed. He's got a bunch of pills that he can get from his grandmother's house. So we start eating Percocets. And that's amazing. Love me some Percocets, love me some alcohol. And that was my breakfast. 2 Perc 30s, 3 shots, hit the school bus, go through school, usually eat 3 more perks at lunch, get through the rest of the day, get home, chug vodka, smoke weed in the woods. And that was my school life for years. And that's all I really wanted to do because there was nothing around for me to do. It was an island. Everything was 45 minutes to an hour away. There was nothing else for me to do to escape my own reality. So I used drugs, alcohol, anything I could get to cope. So we keep going that way. And then eventually our dealer stops selling. We have to go to somebody else, somebody that we don't really know that well. And he starts supplying us different types of painkillers here and there, other weird ecstasy here and there. We start going out into Baltimore, start doing the club thing. At that time, they didn't have curfews. You could get into clubs just saying you didn't want to drink and they didn't really check your ID. So that point, I had a beard. I could pass for 18 at 14, 15. Well, that's fine. We kept doing that for a few years. And then it gets to the point where I'm about 19, almost 20. That's when our main dealer starts partying a little bit harder with this guy that we met named Brody. He's a little trust fund kid, lives on a farm, parties every week, throws massive rager parties. So we go down there. He starts supplying us coke. So we start doing rails at this party. I drank 2 full gallons of vodka through a beer bong. I wake up the next morning, terrible alcohol poisoning, vomiting constantly for almost an entire day. But that was the best party I'd ever been to. I'd already dropped out of college at that point. Nothing super exciting about college for me either because I didn't really see a point to it. Where I was living at was so isolated, the nearest college I could get to was an agricultural college. And I had gone to college for computer sciences. There's no agricultural college that's got a good computer science program. So, dropped out, continued to party. Oh, I'm an adult now. Not got pocket change that or shit I can trade in school in the hallways to get what I wanted. So, me and my friend Mike start realizing that we live on an island. There's all these shipyards around us, full of these big, expensive boats that all these rich assholes just leave unattended most of the year. So we start breaking into them, start stealing out radios. We drive them up to the city to hit the pawn shop, trade them out, get a few dollars, go have a little bit more party time. But that's when I started to realize that, well, this is just going from one end to another. But whatever, it's still something a little bit different. That summer, we decided we wanted to go to the gathering. So we worked all year trying to save up enough money for me and him to be able to drive the shitty little pickup truck all the way out to Cave and Rock, Illinois. This would have been 2007, my first year at the gathering. We drive out, bring nothing with us but some spam, a sleeping bag, and enough alcohol to kill us. We get out there, we drink, and we drink, and we party, we smoke with everybody that we can. We take anything we can find. We just continue to go, go until the gathering's over. We come back. And I realize now that there's so much more than where we had been at. I decided at that point that there should have been more. So we continue to party. I start slowing down a little bit. He goes a little bit harder. I still preferred my pills to all of the drinking and smoking because at that point, weed started not really working for me, started making me feel kind of funny. But we said, we're going to go out real big for his like 19th birthday party. So he goes out, buys quarter pound, and we roll up so many joints to have his whole 6 friends over, and we smoke all night. Halfway through that night, I go to light up a joint and I seize out. Everybody just kind of thinks that I passed out and I'm just real twitchy from all the fucking blow. Apparently, I had developed some kind of intolerance to THC at that point. Any point forward past that night, I'd go to touch weed, just end up having a seizure. If I'm stuck in a room with somebody hotboxing, I'll have a seizure. So, no more weed for me. Sure, that's fine, whatever. Still drinking here and there, still pounding pills as many times as I can get them, still going out to the clubs in the city. And during that time, ecstasy was really big. So, ecstasy was my shit. Gives me a little bit of up, makes me feel good. I'm about that. It's really different. Makes my life a little bit more exciting. And we keep going like that. And we keep partying. I start slowing down again. I'm starting to realize that this is starting to become a bit of a problem. I go to my normal weed dealer and we ask him about some new pills. He hands me big stupid wafer, says me split it in fours, eat it all over the course of 6 hours, go home, look at it, and I try to ask around to a handful of other people, find out what it is. Turns out the dude had given me methadone, and not even a week after that, the other kids that we used to know ended up doing that methadone and overdosing and dying. That was my wake up call that I needed to stop. So I went the very unusual route, recognizing that I had a problem and isolated myself. I took my boat out and took myself to an island, and one of my other friends took my boat away, leaving me stranded there. I didn't have anything but food and water. And all I did while I was there was just kind of reflect on what it was that was driving me to just constantly be looking for more. And the reality was is I was fucking bored. And that was my biggest problem. It wasn't that I needed it to cope. It was that my life at that point had become so stale, so mundane, just so boring that any opportunity that I could find to add a little bit of spice into it, I jumped at it because there was nothing else for me. I never learned any other way to excite myself other than looking for the fastest acting substance. And there were tons of them. So I spent almost 2 weeks on an island, isolating and just thinking. And when I got back, it was okay. I slipped up a few times, but because I took that time to reflect, I knew that that really wasn't for me. At that point, I decided that I needed to find a way to excite myself, find things that were really just for me. So I had had so much fun at the gathering that I decided to start working with musicians. I ended up working with a couple of musicians out of Pennsylvania. I did a tour with ABK. So I started doing that. That was my lifestyle. I went on tour 6 months out of the year, travel the country. It was super exciting, a lot of hard work, but it kept me interested in what was actually going on. So I was able to keep myself from going out just looking for an escape. So a few more years go on, and I'm still doing the gathering every single year. But at this point, I'm doing it sober. And that's so much more fun to me because I get to watch all of these other idiots drinking so much that they're tripping over the rocks that are everywhere. I get to watch these kids that are tripping on so much acid that they don't have a face anymore. They're just staring off into nothingness. I get to see it from this other side that really wasn't there for me at first. But I keep going back, and every year I play this game called Morton's List. It's like, this is the best thing. He throws this random spice of life into my this random spice in my life that I need. So after a few years, I noticed that the numbers are dwindling. There's nobody running it anymore, or the people that are running it aren't putting the effort. So after I decide that I'm done doing the whole touring life thing because it is wrecking my body, I'm making no money, but it's exciting. I go back and really focus on trying to revitalize this thing, Morton's List. So me and this other guy who's always played with me every single year just decide to challenge ourselves to bring this back, bring it back to its former glory. And we start running these games at the Gather. And we do that for a good few years, probably 5 or 6 years before we get any type of recognition. And then we get reached out to by Jump Steady to come work this new thing that they're going to try to do called the Dark Carnival Games Convention. So we get invited to come out and run that. We get invited out onto their radio show. We get to go do that. So we continue to work with inside of Psychopathic, running all of these different Morton's List events. We get invited to have our own booth in the Indiana or no, that would have been Oklahoma City Gathering, which was a shit show. Frank saw us that year. He didn't really interact with us, but we were there. We saw each other. It happened, and I think it was the next year or the year after that. It was the year after that is when we played, right?
Yeah, Indiana.
Well, no, because it would have been the year
Oh,
before Indiana that we played
yeah,
together.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I met Frank because he was going to come out and play Morton's List, but he was scared. And I talked him into coming out and playing. And he played so well and did such terrible, terrible things that he got invited to an MVP game. Some of the best players in the game came out to really just wreck shit for that night. But the game that was rolled was a drinking game. So Frank and I had to sit down and have a discussion about how that could work for a sober guy. And at that point, Frank had no idea that I was also sober because I'm running around doing everything all the time and it's not bothering me at all. You know? So Frank and I talk it out. He ends up chugging a mind altering substance called caffeine instead of any other type of mind altering substance to go wrestle people with his neck and he did phenomenal in the mud, hilarious. And then that's when Frank and I really got to connect, is over this thing of Morton's List. The very next year was Indiana, and we're in the middle of setting up the gaming pavilion. I love that you still have that. But we got to set up the gaming pavilion, and all of a sudden, this is before gathering main gates open. We're basically in well before everybody else. I see Frank coming up the hill, and Frank is the
Man,
hardest
fuck
worker
that
ever.
hill.
Yeah, that hill was awful. And he ended up helping us set up the gaming pavilion that year. And that's when we all sat down and rewrote the 12 steps. It was me, Frank, and like 6 or 7 other people all sitting around a circle, relaxing after a hard day's work. And Frank's just kind of spitballing this idea of trying to have an AA like group for Juggalos, but how do we appeal this to everybody? And everybody around there's immediate thought was just remove all of this religious overtone from the 12 steps, and this makes this so much more approachable. Instead of saying God, make it your higher power. You want to market it to specifically Juggalos, call it the carnival. And that's when we sat down and went through every step of the book. And that year is the year I told Frank, why don't you just go ahead and turn this into a nonprofit? That way we can do more than just some guy with a tent. And we kept rolling with that. And, Frank and I stayed in contact, but we didn't really like hang out with each other. We were friendly, but that was just something we said in passing. A couple of years later, I'm keeping up to date with what's going on with Juggalos in recovery, but Frank's on deployment during the gathering and he wants to make sure we can still hold meetings. I have to have a booth ready and running for Morton's List at every gathering. So he sends me all this information about running these meetings at the gathering. He says he's going to send me over a host, somebody that'll run it for us because we're always busy running around everywhere because we run 24/7. And the guy Frank sends me didn't show up to any of the meetings. So that year, I had to figure out how to run a meeting for 12 steps, having not ever once gone to a sobriety meeting, never dealing with like other sober people besides Frank. And that year, this one random dude showed up for one of the meetings named Ty. And Ty ended up doing a lot of the work for the meetings. I just kind of freeballed it the whole way. I didn't know what I was doing, but we had a decent turnout. So the next year, we do it again. But in between that time, we started running online meetings because, Frank didn't have the time during that time to run online. So we were doing, I think, every 2 weeks instead of every week. So it was every 2 weeks we would do one Friday night meeting, same time, 8:30 every week, and we did that for I want to say 9 full months before we got back to starting to prep for the gathering. So that year we bought a bigger tent and had a bigger tent to run Juggalos in Recovery. And we did it up really big that year. That year we had 30 to 60 people in there every day for every meeting. And from there, Frank asked me if I wanted to come on and do things more. And that's how we got to where we are now. Does anybody have any questions about how we got to where we are, or any questions about the story shits? Frank, you got any thing to add in for details there?
Um. Oh, there's so much more to that. That's literally just a brief overview of the shenanigans that has happened since you and I met. Um, but I do want to ask, how did you actually get into touring, like the music industry type thing? What was your process to get to that
So
point?
it was utterly bizarre. So like I was a goth industrial kid. So I was always out at the goth clubs doing like the super gay dancing. And I ended up bumping into a promoter there. And the promoter I had known for a few years because he was always at this one arcade that I used to hang out at because I'm old people that liked arcade games. So this dude told me about this new club that he was getting ready to set up, and he needed a promoter. So I said, sure, promoting's not fucking hard. So I ended up getting hired on by this guy who schooled me on everything about running a nightclub, everything from booking artists to writing riders for these artists. And he and I went through three different iterations of this club idea that he had before he just kind of dropped off the face of the earth. And at that point, had gotten sober through that process and ended up hooking up with this band, Wicked Wood, which I ended up doing like some street team level promotion stuff for them. And then they had given my contact information to this other band called Seventh Layer out of Pennsylvania. They were in the process of booking a tour with ABK. So I ended up on the road with them. But I ended up hanging out with their roadies and their tour manager more than I was hanging out with the bands themselves. So I ended up talking more shop with them, ended up working with them in the future when it came time for the next tour. And then the one after that. It was all about just happenstance making the right connections in the right areas.
Interesting. Um, I'm gonna ask you the same question you asked me.
Hmm.
Did you ever expect Juggalos in Recovery to get this big?
Fucking no. Do you remember the very first tent we were in? It was held up with a 2x4 because it had collapsed. I
Yep.
never expected us to get any bigger than holding one meeting a day at the gathering once a year. But, you know, we ended up seeing through trial and error that there was a demand for what it is that we did. Well, and there was never any real goal behind it. We just happened to provide a service that people really wanted. We filled a void that we never really knew existed. And I was happy to help facilitate it.
All right. With that being said, where do you want Juggalos in Recovery to go in the future?
I would like to see us get to the point where we are synonymous with Juggalo culture as a whole.
Hmm.
I feel like we're getting up there. We've gotten a handful of people that know who we are and the fact that we're this oddity that exists inside of this culture that is so very drug infused, but we just happen to run sobriety meetings at it. I've been to a couple of other festivals relatively recently. I can't say that I've ever seen any other festival have sobriety meetings at it. Go ahead, Ernie.
I would have to say, Juggalos in Recovery are made for the carnival from the original carnival. I mean, it seems, as you said, the drugs seem to be embedded in the culture. But I remember back in the day, uh, the stories of Jumpsteady and Jay, and the stories they tell about their sister and how, as kids, they promised never to get into drugs and all that. The carnival was never about drugs, and that's why I think it has pushed its magic into creating this. That needs to be a reminder to all the Juggalos and to bring that back. It was old school. They never rapped about drugs. They never rapped anything like that. And that, I know life gets to the way it is, and people think of Juggalos as all being druggies and everything, but the carnival is against that, pretty much. It's
Yeah.
counter to everybody's true nature. So, I mean, I just see it as absolutely an arm of the carnival. And I just imagine it's just going to grow, and the seeds are there. I see it very vital to the whole mythology or whatever.
Yeah. Right. D.
Yo, appreciate your service, Chris. Appreciate your service, Chris. I've never heard your story in full length to that detail. That shit was fire. And Nate, sorry I was tattooing somebody, so I didn't get to really speak during your shit. I really appreciate your service too. Um, and like your story is definitely unique, and to be put in a position where never been in the 12 steps room and then doing the 12 steps meetings, and then all of this just flourishing since then is pretty still mind boggling. And I can remember, I don't know if you were in charge of the Facebook page or Frank or Ty when I was bugging about what happened to the Zoom meetings, but I was talking to somebody. And those things like made me feel so welcomed and were so inspiring in early recovery, or well, while I was stagnant in recovery, you know what I mean? And it made me
Yeah.
feel so comfortable about being able to go to the gathering and knowing I'm not alone between just you and Ty and Frank when he could show up because he deployed all the time. And that first year at that tent outside was so fucking magical to see all the random people coming in to getting coins besides the ones of us that were just hanging out there or at the meetings. And like I tried to catch as many as I could for it being my first year gathering and wanting to see 100 things. And like Ty was the most welcoming dude. He's like, "You ain't camp with nobody? You could come over and camp with us." And I was like, oh, "Okay, fresh." You know, like I got sober people. I got people to camp with. I'm meeting all these people. I'm seeing all this shit. Like this is beautiful. And then just like the people I've met through the last couple years gathering, and then the more people I'll meet this year, it's just been mind boggling. It's something I would have never fathomed. Like when I was in my addiction, I had no hopes of ever gathering. I couldn't get out of Florida, let alone keep a driver's license or have the extra money to go do anything. You know, like that was all thanks to sobriety. You know, and like being able to face my fears and overcome them. You know, and it's been a magical few years, and it will be many magical more years to come with all the people coming in and helping this flourish and grow. And I like what you said about being synonymous with the community. You know what I mean? Like that would be the perfect ideal goal. I was kind of talking to Frank, like, think about it, because like people in NA know the guy who started NA in the book, and people know the people that started AA, and like think about it, we're the first front line, all these people through the years that actually show up to meetings, that show up online, that show up in person at the tent, that contribute, that are like helping this thing grow. So this is like being like the first 100 of Alcoholics Anonymous, but for a Juggalo community, or the first person for NA or CAA or whatever A you work, you know who started it and wrote the book for it, right? So we get to partake in something that eventually it will be synonymous, because we're getting older. Everybody gets older. They get smarter. They get wiser, or they get tired of their own shit. They want to grow and change. And then we're the ones standing there waiting for them to come. Like it's a beautiful experience. So appreciate everybody. Love this shit.
Thanks, D. Nate, you're up next. Where'd he go? Nate? You had your hand up? All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Fucking phone. I was just saying, you've told me a little bit of your story at the gathering when we were there chilling, but never really heard it all the way through. So thank you for that. I have seen only one other group of like recovery, and it wasn't even recovery. It was just more of like a overdose awareness stuff at a punk show. Um, you know, over, ever since I've been in sobriety. So yeah, we're definitely unique. Um, my whole goal, and I feel it through your share and Frank's share, everybody is just to reach as many people as we can, um, to let them know that they're not alone. You know what I mean? And if anybody were to ask me where I see Juggalos in recovery going, hopefully that's it. Is that we're just here to reach people, as many as we can, and let them know they're not alone. Because the Juggalo community is just, it's definitely a unique bunch of people, and I'm just happy to be part of it, and I'm glad for you and to have you in my life, and for your share. So thank you. That's all I got.
Thanks, Nate. Like that's the biggest thing is every single one of us has our own unique story. We all have our own unique journey to get to the end goal of sobriety. And none of our paths are wrong. They're just different. D, you got your hand up?
Yeah, Nate said it, so it made me remember because I was thinking about that too. When I was at Welcome to Rockville, they had an AA tent just like the Gathering, and I was like, "Oh, that's fresh." It was Soberville was the name of the tent, and I was like, "Oh shit!" So I didn't have time because I was only there for one day and busy running around the whole time. But then I stopped in at the inn and was talking to them. And then I was walking around more at the end. That's where I met the Narcan plug that I got a call that said they can give me as much shit as I need because they work the Rockville Festival every year, which is 3-4 times the size of the Gathering.
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, this is so fucking fresh. So now I know if I ever come to this shit again, like there's a sober community. They said they've been doing it since like the second year it started. Of a whole bunch of, rock and rap enthusiasts, doing a sobriety area with their own team of harm reduction running around. So I was like, that's amazing. Love seeing this
Yeah.
shit.
That's awesome. Frank, you're up.
So I've told D, I've told Enzo, I've told Nate. I feel like I tend to not give you as much props as you deserve because, you and I have been doing this for a while. But Juggalos in Recovery wouldn't be what it is without you either. Like, you've helped guide me in things that I just had no fucking idea about. And you've taken over in times when I couldn't be there. So, and one thing I really, really love about what you give to the community through your meetings and your talks and stuff is your unique outlook and unique way of explaining things. And it's one of the things I really admire about you because it gets to more people than what people who have been through 12-step meetings. More, it gets to the other people who have never been to a 12-step meeting. You can explain it in a way that others can understand. So we end up reaching more people that way. So I just want you to know that no matter how little I say it, I really do appreciate everything you do for this community and me and keeping me on the right track because if it wasn't for you, D, Nate, all the other people around, this thing probably would have fell apart a long ass time ago.
No, I appreciate the recognition, but it's not necessary. I don't do this for recognition. I don't do it for a slap on the back. I'm here to fill the void. If people stopped showing up to the meetings and I was no longer needed, then that would be amazing. Would love to no longer be needed. But until that day comes, I'm going to continue to do what I do because it's all that I know how to do to help the people that need it.
See, and that's the shit that I'm talking about. You have this different ass outlook on life, and it baffles my mind how your brain works like that. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck? Like, why can't I think of shit like that?
It's probably because I'm gay.
God damn it, Chris.
Yeah. But like that's the thing. We've all lived very interesting lives. We've all had different paths to get to where we are. But we all want roughly the same end goal. We're here for the people that need us. And if the story helps at all, that's great. But if not, oh well. I know we're gonna end up needing to fill some more time because I know my fucking essay on the song's not gonna be that long. So has anybody else got any more questions before we start talking about the music side? Skylar, go ahead.
It was really relatable about what you said about having trouble finding ways to kill the boredom. That's kind of where I'm at, is where you're at. And it really is tempting sometimes, like, well, this is boring. Why not go find entertainment partying my ass off? Like, it's always interesting to hear friends talk about, like, oh, like, I got to meet strippers, do coke, and hang out with them. And it's like, damn, I really want to do that. But then it's like, well, but then I know how that ends. But at the same time, it sounds a lot more interesting and a lot more fun than living life the right way, if that makes sense. And I agree with you, and that's where kind of more endless helps, is because, I mean, damn, man, like, stability is awesome, but at the same time, like, God, if it isn't monotonous, just doing the same shit over and over and over again.
Monotony can be boring. It can be, but that's where you have to learn to add spontaneity in your life. If you're not spontaneous to just drop what you're doing when you see something that you want to do, then you end up looking for those other escapes. And that's the biggest thing for me. Some days I don't know what to do. I'm bored as shit. And that's when I'm at my most dangerous is I've got nothing better to do. And there's alcohol in my house that I use for cooking occasionally. If I really wanted to, I could get bored one day and drink, but the likelihood of that happening because of how I live my life, with the ability to just go find something new to do at the drop of a hat, makes it easy for me to continue to be sober. It's not always the case for everybody, and you've got to find out what's going to work for you to help you keep on that straight and narrow path. The biggest thing for me that I think helped in the long run was I am forever a cheap asshole. And I started calculating out how much it cost me to continue to party the way that I did. And the way I calculated it out is I would need to make way more money than I am qualified to make to continue to go the way that I was going. While I am not an idiot, I am not smart enough to be making $3 grand a week to spend on a party that only lasts me 2 days. So think about what it is that you enjoy doing on a daily basis. I go out to the park, I walk around, and that's fun for me. That keeps my brain entertained. It keeps me distracted enough to where I'm comfortable to go home and go relax and not think about needing anything else. But we also have all of the skateboarding that we do, all the traveling that we do, and then all of the concerts we have to look forward to. Uh, Jimmy, go ahead.
Hey, homie. I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. And what you just said right there, I agree with 1017%, bro. Like, when I first got into recovery, my sponsor told me, he's like, listen, this program is meant to give you a life, not be your life. You know what I'm saying? And then, like, I always promote to people, find hobbies, find interests, do things that you like to do. You know what I mean? And then, like, expand upon that. You know what I mean? Because I could overdose and potentially become addicted to, like, recovery in a sense. You know what I mean? Or my job or eating or sex or whatever, because we're creatures of habit. You know what I mean? And it's like what you just said just really resonated with me. You know what I mean? Because it's like, and it's like living in that moment in a sense, but also being spontaneous. There's so many different elements and aspects of life when you really sit down and think about it. You know what I mean? But that's the beauty of it. We're able to think today. I'm not just, like you said, blindly staring at something after I ate a sheet of acid. You know what I mean? Like, it's the
Yeah.
beauty of, like, thinking, implementing, and enjoying. You know what I mean? And just living a lot better than how we used to.
Yeah. Oh, and like that's the biggest thing is I like what you said about the idea of becoming addicted to recovery because we've seen that happen and we've
Yeah.
seen the burnout that happens with that, Frank. And the idea of throwing yourself full force into the service work, this idea of like, I'm sober now, I got to fill this void with helping other people also be sober is awful because you get stuck dealing with addicts. You get stuck in the addict mindset, and your entire brain gets riddled with dealing with the worst parts of recovery because your entire focus then becomes, oh, we're just not going to do this thing that was fun for us. There is no other part of your life at that point. And that's the only thing you focus on. And that's so fucking boring. That's just not a life to have. So we try to fill those voids with these other things that we like to do. Juggalos in Recovery is based on a music scene, so we focus on the music. Let's go ahead and start going to more concerts. You can have fun at concerts without doing drugs, without drinking, without doing weird shit, whatever it is you're addicted to. You can go do those things. You can go do things that are adjacent to it. Pick up an instrument, start learning how to play music, become a DJ, start scratching records if that's your jam. Start making your own music. Whatever it is that is adjacent to the hobbies or interests that you already have, make them bigger. Start doing more. Because, like when it comes back to my origins was playing Morton's List. That was a highlight of my gather. And expanding on that, running Morton's List. Sure, that made perfect sense because that gave me something to focus on. That gave me a goal to work towards. That gave me something to fill the time outside of those weeks of a year with more of that same interest, that same dedication throughout the year. So find the things that you enjoy in life, expand on them, and then find ways to incorporate them into more of your time instead of just focusing on what it is in that moment as well. Live in the moment, be spontaneous, but have goals to work towards to keep you motivated.
Chris,
Yes?
this year is a big year for Morton's List, right?
Yeah, I know.
Is that going to be portrayed at this year's gathering? Are you and I going to roll again on the new?
Every year it has to happen.
I agree. We'll make it happen.
Yeah. No, we'll see. But does
I
anybody
would
else
like
have
to see
any?
Dave involved in that quest with you and Frank. And I would also like to get involved. I hope it involves crossing a body of water again. I would very much like to participate in that so I can go across one and then backflip and break my neck in the lake.
I would really like to see you throw a flaming chair as good as Frank can.
You're on, Frank. I hope you're ready. I'm I'm pretty explosive, so I got it.
Yeah, no. The one quest that damn near got us ejected. Uh-huh.
Yeah, ejected from the whole fucking grounds. That was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. But I was able to talk us out of that. So that works for me. Does anybody else have any other questions about shenanigans throughout my life? All right, Skylar.
For this year's quest, can we do Ding Dong Ditch on Billy Bill's trailer 3 times in a row?
Absolutely fucking not. M?
Chris, I'm sorry I missed your story. I've been missing everyone's stories today. I hope I get to hear it soon. What time do the meetings go on till today?
I think they go on until midnight.
Okay.
So as of right now, the only thing scheduled after you, Chris, is the podcast that me and Concrete. I interviewed Concrete for this because he didn't know if he was going to make it. But if he's here and he's willing to run a meeting, he's more than willing to talk and run a meeting. I see you here, Concrete.
When is that?
So Chris's thing ends
At 8?
At 8 Eastern. Are you Eastern time, M?
No,
Yeah.
I'm Central.
Central, so 7 your time, and then
What
yeah,
time would I have
7
to run
your
said meeting?
time. I don't know. Concrete, are you gonna have time to, or are you able to run a meeting and stuff and tell a little bit
What
about your
time?
story?
What time now? Or
In about what, an hour, Chris, give or take?
Yeah. Give or take.
could do that. It'd be about 5 o'clock my time, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to jump off again. But I'm gonna try to come back definitely later tonight. Love you
Okay.
guys.
All right.
Love
Love
you
you, Evan.
too.
Be good.
All
Bye.
these are recorded, right?
Oh yes.
Yes.
I never ran a control a meeting before,
And
but
Oh, you're fine.
Just
Just do you.
hit the link and come back on at 5 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah. All right. But anybody else got any questions before we get into the song?
My headphones died. I might have to bail out for an hour until they charge.
Understood.
I
That's
can't move
perfect
my
enough
phone
time
when
for
it
me to
really
finish.
crappy service conditions.
I'm
I move
disappointed
my
I
phone
missed
to
Endo's
get my
meeting
service.
because I woke up at fucking 4 p.m.
Damn, dude, that's brutal. Yeah,
Also,
Enzo did birthday bitches for his meditation, and I got to hear his origin story. It was dope.
shit, I missed his origin story. And crap, I knew I was forgetting something, and that was it. Happy birthday, Enzo. If you're in here, I'll also send him a text.
Sing for
we could
them.
hear all the stories on video,
Happy
though.
birthday to you.
I heard a
Yes.
demand to sing, and since the crowd
Yes.
demands it, so it shall be. Happy birthday to you, Enzo. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Enzo. Happy
Happy
birthday
birthday, Enzo
Day
motherfucker.
to you, though.
Enzo. Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday, day to you.
Wow, it was awful.
Thank you.
Your
Happy
gift is that the song ended.
recovery to
They
Juggalos.
honor.
Your gift is that the song came to an end.
I love this.
No, it was purposely awful, but that's what makes it funny. We could always sing the version of Happy Birthday, You Live in a Zoo. That's even more cringe.
It was perfect the way you sang, Sky.
Right.
Appreciate that,
Well,
man.